Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Every long road trip starts to feel the same after midnight. Miles of empty highway, dark trees, gas stations that all look identical. You stop paying attention to the road, not because you're tired, because nothing changes. At least, that's how it always felt to me, until I missed exit 47. Or at least, I thought I missed it. 5 minutes later, the exact same exit appeared again. Same broken billboard, same abandoned gas station, same faded green sign. I told myself I had simply misread the number. Then I passed exit 47, 6 more times, without ever turning around. This happened during the fall of 2023. I was driving alone from western Pennsylvania to Missouri, nearly 13 hours on the road. I preferred driving overnight. Less traffic, cooler weather, fewer construction delays. By midnight, the interstate was almost empty. Only an occasional semi-truck passed every few miles. Around 1:30 a.m., my GPS instructed me to stay on Interstate 64 for another 90 miles. Easy enough. I settled into the drive. Music low, cruise control set, coffee in the cup holder. About 20 minutes later, I noticed an exit sign, exit 47. Below it stood an old gas station, completely dark. A rusted pickup truck parked beside the pumps. Nothing unusual. 5 minutes later, I saw it again. Same exit, same gas station, same pickup truck. Even the broken billboard beside the road leaned at the exact same angle. I frowned. Maybe another exit 47A. Reasonable explanation, at least initially. I checked the sign carefully. It simply read, exit 47. My GPS continued calmly. Continue for 84 miles. The road remained perfectly straight. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't taken any exits. 10 minutes later, exit 47 appeared again. This time, I slowed down. The pickup truck still sat beside pump 3. One headlight was missing. The driver's door hung slightly open, exactly as before. A chill crept across my shoulders. I pulled onto the shoulder, checked my phone. The GPS map insisted I was making steady progress west. No loops, no rerouting, nothing. I continued driving. Another 7 minutes. Exit 47. Again, my fuel gauge had dropped below a quarter tank. Against my better judgment, I finally took the exit. The gas station looked abandoned. Grass pushed through cracks in the concrete. The price sign stood blank. No lights. No employees. The pickup truck remained exactly where I'd seen it every time. I parked beside pump 2. The silence felt overwhelming. No insects. No traffic. No wind. Then I heard it, a gasoline pump clicking, slowly, rhythmically. Nobody stood nearby. The sound came from pump 3, beside the old pickup. The fuel nozzle slowly lifted. By itself, it swung gently, as though someone had just picked it up. My hands tightened around my flashlight. A voice quietly drifted across the empty station. You finally stopped. I turned toward the convenience store. The glass doors reflected only darkness. No movement. I think you have the wrong person, I called. Silence. Then the same voice. Closer this time. You've driven past too many times. I backed toward my car. Started the engine immediately. The headlights swept across the station. For just a second, I thought I saw someone standing inside the store. Perfectly still. Watching. I accelerated back onto the interstate. Didn't look back. The GPS recalculated. Estimated arrival time. Hadn't changed. Around 15 minutes later, another green highway sign appeared. Exit 48. I laughed out loud. Relief washed over me. Finally, something different. I continued driving. Another 10 minutes. The next sign appeared. Exit 47. My stomach dropped. The same gas station waited below. Only this time, the pickup truck was gone. Instead, my own car sat beside pump 3. Engine running. Driver's door open. I didn't stop. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The highway remained empty. No other cars. No trucks. Nothing. Just before sunrise, I reached a busy rest area, the first people I'd seen in hours. I parked, walked inside, bought another coffee. The cashier noticed I looked exhausted. He asked where I'd been driving. I mentioned the strange exit. His expression changed. He quietly asked, 47? I hadn't mentioned the number. He nodded slowly. Years earlier, before the interstate was expanded, an old service station stood near exit 47. It closed after a new bypass opened. Eventually, the buildings were demolished. The exit itself was renumbered. Officially, exit 47 no longer existed. Mostly, I checked my dashcam when I reached home. The recording showed hours of ordinary highway driving. No repeated exits. No abandoned gas station. Nothing. Except for one frame. Just one. The camera briefly captured a faded roadside sign. Exit 47. Parked beside Pump 3. Was my car. The timestamp on the video matched the exact moment. I was still driving past it. I don't take overnight road trips anymore. If I start getting tired, I stop at a busy travel plaza, a well-lit truck stop, anywhere with other people around. Because sometimes, the road doesn't want you to keep driving. When you're driving across the country, rest stops become your lifeline. A place to stretch your legs, grab a drink, use the restroom. Wake yourself up before getting back on the highway. Every interstate has them. Everyone appears on the GPS. Everyone is marked with blue signs miles before you reach it. That's why what happened that night made absolutely no sense. At 2:41 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop that wasn't on any map. No highway sign announced it. No GPS acknowledged it. Yet the parking lot was full of cars. The lights were on. The vending machines worked. And everyone inside acted as though they'd been waiting for me. This happened in October of 2023. I was driving from Arizona to Colorado, a 10-hour drive. I left just after sunset to avoid daytime traffic. By midnight, the interstate had emptied. Occasionally another car passed. Mostly, it was just me. Around 2:30, I started feeling tired. Not dangerously tired, just enough that I wanted coffee. I searched for the nearest rest area. Nothing. According to my GPS, the next one was almost 60 miles away. A few minutes later, bright lights appeared ahead. A large blue building sat beside the interstate. Rows of parked vehicles surrounded it. Pickup trucks, SUVs, semis. Everything looked normal. I frowned. Why wasn't it on the map? Reasonable explanation. Maybe a newly built travel plaza. My GPS database wasn't perfect. At least, that's what I assumed. I exited the highway, pulled into the parking lot. Everything looked surprisingly clean. Fresh pavement, bright lighting, perfect landscaping. Dozens of vehicles filled the lot. Yet, I didn't hear a single engine. Not one door closing. Not one conversation. I stepped out. The silence felt strange. Inside, the building looked spotless. Coffee machines, snack shelves, maps, travel brochures. Everything exactly where you'd expect. Only one thing bothered me. There wasn't an employee anywhere. No cashier. No maintenance worker. Nobody stocking shelves. A coffee pot sat on the warmer. Steam still rising. I poured a cup. It was hot. Fresh. Somewhere deeper inside the building. I heard a child laughing. Then, footsteps. Several people slowly walked into the convenience area. Families. Truck drivers. An older couple. A young woman carrying a backpack. Every one of them smiled politely as they passed. None of them spoke. They simply wandered through the aisles, picking up items, looking at products, then placing everything back exactly where it had been. Nobody bought anything. My stomach tightened. I walked toward the restroom hallway. Halfway there, I noticed a large wall map. The interstate appeared exactly as expected. Except, the rest stop where I stood wasn't marked. Instead, a handwritten note had been pinned to the map. You can stay until sunrise. I looked around. Nobody seemed to notice it. I decided it was time to leave. As I headed toward the exit, an older man sitting near the entrance quietly spoke. Long drive. I nodded. Almost finished. He smiled sadly. No one's ever almost finished. Before I could answer, he looked back down at the newspaper in his lap. The date caught my eye. October 12th. I blinked. Looked again. The newspaper was gone. Only his empty hands rested on his knees. I hurried outside. The parking lot had changed. Every vehicle looked older. Rust covered the bumpers. Paint had faded. Some tires appeared completely flat. My own car remained exactly where I'd parked it. Engine cold, as though it had been sitting there for hours. I climbed inside immediately. Started the engine. Pulled toward the highway entrance. The exit road curved gently uphill. Then, without warning, ended at a chain-link fence. No interstate. Only trees. My pulse quickened. I turned around. Drove back toward the building. It wasn't there. Only an empty gravel lot. Overgrown with weeds. No lights. No parked cars. Nothing. The interstate entrance suddenly stood 50 yards away. Exactly where it should have been. I merged back onto the highway. Checked my GPS. It calmly announced, "Continue 58 miles to the next rest area." As though I'd never stopped. The following morning, I mentioned the strange place to a highway patrol officer while buying breakfast. He listened quietly, then asked, "Did anyone tell you to stay until sunrise?" I hadn't mentioned the note. He nodded. Years earlier, a roadside travel plaza had operated near that stretch of highway. It closed after a new interstate bypass shifted traffic. Eventually, every building was demolished. The land was reclaimed. Officially, nothing remained there. Mostly, several months later, I reviewed the dashcam footage. The highway recording remained normal, except for one section. Exactly 11 minutes were missing. The timestamp jumped forward. No corruption. No error message. Just 11 minutes gone. The last recorded frame before the gap showed a blue highway sign. Rest area, 1 mile. The first frame after the gap showed empty interstate. No exit. No buildings. Nothing. I've driven that highway several times since then. Never found the place again. Never saw another sign. But whenever I'm driving late at night, and I see lights in the distance that my GPS doesn't recognize, I keep driving. Because not every place that offers you a chance to rest expects you to leave again. People always tell you never to pick up hitchhikers. Most of the time, that's common sense. You don't know who they are. You don't know where they're going. You don't know what they want. During my 20s, I drove across the country more times than I can remember. Thousands of miles. Dozens of states. I passed plenty of hitchhikers. I never stopped. Until one desert highway made me question whether I'd ever really passed one at all. Because no matter how many miles I drove, the same man was always waiting beside the road, exactly 1 mile ahead. This happened during the summer of 2022. I was driving from New Mexico toward Nevada, a long overnight drive through some of the emptiest highways I'd ever seen. No towns for miles, no cell service, just endless pavement cutting through the desert. I left Albuquerque shortly after sunset. By midnight, there were almost no other vehicles on the road. Around 1:10 a.m., my headlights caught someone standing beside a faded highway marker. A man wearing a dark denim jacket, jeans, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. One worn backpack rested at his feet. His thumb pointed toward the highway. Nothing unusual. People still hitchhiked through parts of the Southwest. I kept driving. Exactly 1 mile later, I saw him again. Same jacket, same backpack, same pose, standing beside another mile marker. I frowned. Maybe another traveler dressed similarly. Reasonable explanation, at least initially. The third time, I slowed down. The man looked identical. Even the tear in the left sleeve of his jacket matched. I checked the odometer. Exactly 1 mile had passed. I accelerated. 5 more miles. Every mile marker. The man waited. Always exactly 1 mile ahead. Never walking. Never turning around. Simply standing there. Waiting. My stomach tightened. The GPS showed steady progress. No loops. No wrong turns. Nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself exhaustion was playing tricks on me. I pulled into a small truck stop around 2 a.m., filled the gas tank, bought another coffee. The cashier looked at me for a long moment. "You look like you've seen something." I laughed nervously. "Just a hitchhiker." He quietly asked, "Still 1 mile ahead?" I hadn't mentioned that. He didn't explain. Only wished me a safe drive. I left quickly. Back on the highway. The desert became even darker. The moon disappeared behind clouds. 1 mile later, the hitchhiker returned. This time, he wasn't facing the road. He faced my car. As I drove past, he slowly raised one hand, not asking for a ride, pointing toward me. Every hair on my arm stood up. I pressed harder on the accelerator. 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. The next mile marker approached. The hitchhiker waited there. Already. Impossible. No one could move that quickly. I kept driving. Another 10 miles. Every marker. Every mile. The same man. Around 3 a.m. My fuel gauge dropped lower than expected. I spotted an isolated gas station. One pump. One old service garage. Lights still on. As I stepped out of the car, I realized something. There wasn't another vehicle anywhere. The attendant sat quietly behind the counter. Older man. White beard. Reading a newspaper. Without looking up, he said, "You never stopped for him." I froze. Who? He finally looked at me. The man who's trying to catch up. Before I could ask another question, the lights flickered. When they stabilized, the attendant was gone. The newspaper remained open on the counter. The date read, July 18th. I backed out of the station immediately. The highway felt different now. Quieter. Heavier. 1 mile later, the hitchhiker stood closer to the road than before. His thumb was no longer raised. His arm hung at his side. His head followed my car as I passed. Another mile. He stood even closer. Another mile. 1 foot from the white line. My breathing became shallow. I realized something terrifying. He wasn't staying 1 mile ahead. He was waiting for me to reach him. Slowly. 1 mile at a time. Then, without warning, my engine lost power. The dashboard lights flickered. The speed dropped. 60, 50, 40. The next mile marker approached. The hitchhiker waited beside it. This time, he smiled. My car rolled to a stop almost directly beside him. I couldn't bring myself to look out the driver's window. A soft knock echoed against the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, silence. The engine suddenly restarted by itself. Every warning light disappeared. I pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward. I drove until sunrise without stopping once. When daylight finally filled the desert, the highway looked ordinary again. No hitchhiker. No abandoned gas stations. Nothing. Months later, I mentioned the experience to a retired state trooper during a roadside diner conversation. He became unusually quiet, then asked, "Did he knock 3 times?" I hadn't mentioned the knocking. The trooper explained that drivers had reported seeing a lone hitchhiker along that stretch of highway for decades. Always at night. Always 1 mile ahead. Always disappearing after sunrise. No official investigation ever found anyone. Mostly, a year later, I sold that car, bought a newer SUV. Different engine, different license plate, different everything. During its very first road trip, I drove through a completely different state, completely different highway. Around midnight, I passed a faded mile marker. Standing beside it was a man in a worn denim jacket, baseball cap, backpack, thumb raised. I looked down at my odometer. Exactly 1 mile later, I saw him again. I didn't slow down. I didn't look in the mirror. And I haven't driven overnight through empty highways since. Because some hitchhikers aren't waiting for a ride. They're waiting for the driver who finally stops.